In order to encourage investors to develop wind farms, President Carter and Governor Brown offered federal and state tax subsidies. The wind power industry began without environmental studies. People jumped on board for the tax benefits. OPEC nations like Saudi Arabia then decided to flood the market with oil, driving prices even lower and putting the smaller producing nations out of business. The depressed price of oil was catastrophic to the U.S. oil industry. President Ronald Reagan saw that the oil prices were low. Wind power was costly, and it provided little energy. Federal and state tax subsidies for wind power were scrapped. The wind industry went into decline. The tax subsidies for wind energy development were reinstated during President Bill Clinton's terms. The Whitewater Hill is an example of the various types of wind turbines developed in the past 25 years. Many of the turbines aren't even functioning. Tax subsidies and renewable mandates back in force, the big power wind developers moved in, like GE, Enron, Shell Oil, Florida Power and Light, Windtech, Whitewater Energy, and a score of others, installing over 4,000 wind turbines in Palm Springs alone, removing everything living in their paths, creating miles of concrete bases, thousands of steel towers, and fiberglass blades, mostly imported from other countries until recently. All of the materials for these wind turbines were transported across the oceans by ship, across the land by rail, or trucks spewing emissions into the atmosphere for thousands of miles.
Is that we have this huge mass of air coming in from the Inland Empire. Mother Nature has created the two mountain ranges, which can basically act like the edge of a water hose in your thumb. And what's happening is that we're squeezing that same amount of air that's going to be traveling through a smaller area. It's only about 10 miles wide. So the only way to do that, to move the same amount of air through this area in the same amount of time, is to create a faster movement of air. So that's what happens, is that we squeeze that air and it moves extremely fast. The speed of the air is amplified through that small pass.
Palm trees were traded in for tall tubes of steel and fiberglass blades.
When I bought in 1990, there were none of the big windmills over here. All that were there were the little gray ones that you see down there and some behind. None of those on top of the hill or over there were even here. There were no windmills down here except way down by the freeway. There were some small ones. All these have come in since then. And part of this hill over here was not even zoned for wind at the time. And the man who owned it went to the county and cried and whined and said, oh, I need to put up windmills, and they rezoned it for him. There were safety setbacks, there were wind access setbacks, and they slowly chipped away at them.
And how come none of these windmills, none of them are moving right now?
Because the wind isn't blowing strong enough. It has to get up to a certain speed. The smaller ones will pick up the wind automatically.
But they're not even moving either.
They're not moving because there isn't enough of a breeze. It has to be up to a certain speed. The big ones have to take a higher speed to turn, but they're started by electric power. They use electric power to start the big ones up to catch the wind. So they're not generating power until they get to turning, and they're using power until they're turning. Doesn't make sense.
So when we have a extremely hot day here in the Coachella Valley, we're talking about temperatures above 110 degrees, which typically happens in the middle summer months. Typically our hottest time of the year is late July. We only see a temperature difference of about 10 degrees during these extremely hot days. And that temperature difference just isn't enough to create a large pressure gradient. A a large enough pressure gradient to create the strong winds through the pass. We'll see a light wind on those days because of the temperature difference being so small.
It's 112 degrees. No wind is blowing. When the wind turbines aren't producing energy, reliable backup energy sources must be available, like natural gas, nuclear energy, coal, and hydroelectric sources. Hospitals, emergency centers, schools, homes, businesses, and fire departments continue to need electricity whether the wind blows or not. Billions in tax subsidies, thousands of wind turbines for energy that is not reliable.